welcome all the participants of Asia-Africa Democracy Forum. My name is Inkara, and I'm from Kazakhstan, which is in Central Asia. The region of Central Asia includes 5 former Soviet Union republics: Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. And today I'm going to present some of the findings on SDGs, human rights, and civic space in Central Asia. To begin with, here is an overview of national mechanisms on SDGs. As can be seen from the chart, the countries of Central Asia have committed to achieve the 2030 agenda almost from the beginning. They made some steps towards nationalization of SDGs, with most of the countries adopting the global goals and targets. The governments of Central Asia have embarked on national development strategies and launched various initiatives to improve the sustainable development. As can be seen from the chart, all countries of Central Asia have prepared at least one voluntary national review, starting from 2017. And Kazakhstan is currently in the process for preparation for its second cycle in 2020. However, despite the existence of this national initiatives, a proper coordination mechanism that is able to track developments of SDG achievements in Central Asia as a whole is missing, but would be very beneficial to the purpose of ensuring an integrated cooperation. Here is the data from the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, SDSN, which shows us the state of SDG implementation and the trends. We can see where the country is performing better than the last year. We can also see here the score and rank. If we look at the picture, we can see that countries in Central Asia they face a set of interrelated sustainable development challenges. According to the ranking of SDG achievements, so far Kyrgyzstan takes the first place in the region, followed by Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan, which is the bottom. Looking beyond the ranking, some countries are more on track towards achieving a few of the SDGs, while others face major challenges across many of the goals. Of the 17 goals, countries in Central Asia are on average closest to achieving SDG 1, we can see here from the chart, and SDG 4, which is equality education. The majority of the countries are facing major challenges on goal 5, which is gender equality, also but access to basic services and infrastructure covered under the SDG 6 and 7. They are improving quite rapidly. We can see that the overall trend is very promising. By contrast, rising levels of obesity and unsustainable agriculture, they are hindering progress on SDG 2, zero hunger. We can see that most of the states, they are stagnant. Central Asia is also regressing on goal 11, which is sustainable cities and communities, also poor performance and limited progress on mitigating climate change and protecting biodiversity. And SDG 16 remains very problematic. If we look in more detail to some of the goals, for example, goal 5, which is SDG on gender equality, the overall trend does not look promising. So far, we can say that Kazakhstan, to a certain extent, is better than all the other countries. The rest have relatively low performance. And despite the existing efforts made by the governments to achieve gender equality in the region and empower all the women and girls, they continue to be subjected to discrimination, violence, and denied to full realization of their human rights. Gender parity in labor force participation and the average number of years of education of women is still quite low in the region. In addition, there was an increase of cases of violence during the pandemic, and women's burden of providing uncare work has further increased, disproportionately exposing them to loss of jobs and livelihoods. If we look at the goal 10, which is inequality, unfortunately no data available here, But the COVID-19 crisis has magnified existing inequalities and the gaps. Poor countries, they face an especially difficult road to recovery, with high amount of their GDPs depending on the remittances of migrant workers from Russia, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. They are particularly vulnerable to the ravages of the virus, which increases the levels of inequality. The inequality level across the region within the countries is also relatively high in Central Asia. Tajikistan, for example, has the largest welfare gap between rural and urban areas. The Kyrgyz Republic also has a large urban-rural gap, but regional poverty has been decreasing slightly in this country in recent decades. Goal 16 remains the most significant challenges. And I think it's a common challenge for all the countries. Peace and justice issues remain problematic in the region, primarily due to high level of perceived corruption in many countries. These challenges, of course, have been further exaggerated by the pandemic, which has in some cases reversed previous gains on SDG 16. During the state of emergency, for example, in Kazakhstan, more than 16,000 people have been detained for violating the state of emergency. Also, there are some cross-border issues between Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan related to control over natural resources and water, which also has an impact on overall peace and security situation in the region. From this graph, we can observe the SDG linkages to human rights. Using this innovative data mining procedure, it has been possible to link recommendations received from the UPR to specific SDGs and targets. And as can be seen from the chart, a majority of recommendations received by the Central Asia countries address the equality issues, which is SDG 5 and 10. A big number of recommendations also linked to SDG 8, which is decent work. The most recommendations were received on core labor standards and goal 4 education. And of course, not surprisingly, the majority of all recommendations are connected to SDG 16, achieving peace, justice, and strong institutions. The global pandemic. As in other parts of the world, the pandemic in Central Asia is worsening. If we look at the figures, the cumulative confirmed COVID cases per million, Kazakhstan seemed to be hit the hardest, with the total number of cases of 900,023 people being infected by the virus, followed by Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan. These two countries have relatively the same amount of number of cases. And Tajikistan seems quite safe in comparison with other countries. And Turkmenistan so far did not disclose any data on COVID-19. But I want to emphasize that the number of reported cases highly depends on countries' ability to conduct tests and strategy that the country used for administering this test. If we look at the daily cases per million, as can be seen from this chart, I think this summer has seen an increase in the number of cases in Kazakhstan, with officials reporting about 8,000 cases daily in early August, which is, I think, 4 times higher than the country was reporting last year in August 2020. As travel slowly resumed during the summer, COVID spread very rapidly among the unvaccinated population. And now countries of Central Asia find themselves in a very worsening epidemiological situation. In terms of deaths per million, Kazakhstan also has the highest number, followed by Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan. Again, according to this data, Tajikistan looks more or less safe, but the countries of Central Asia and especially Tajikistan have been criticized for not accurately reporting these numbers. About vaccinations, governments across the region are using different methods to increase the vaccination rates, which unfortunately remain very low in the Central Asia region. If we look at the chart, we can see that Kazakhstan has administered 42%, of which only 38% have been fully vaccinated. In Uzbekistan, 17% of population was fully vaccinated and 21% has taken a first dose, making a total of 38%. In Tajikistan, the number is very low, 26% of total vaccinated population, of which only 21% has been fully vaccinated. And Kyrgyzstan has the lowest number, only 11% of fully vaccinated population, and just 3% of population has been partially vaccinated. No data available for vaccination in Turkmenistan. Vaccines so far, vaccines from China and Russia are the one that commonly used and available in the Central Asian region, but Kazakhstan has engineered its own vaccine called Kazvac, which is also available in the country, and it's being sent to neighboring countries. And also Turkey is conducting the trial stages of its Turkovac vaccine in Kyrgyzstan. This is the situation about the whole data and vaccination in Central Asia. If we talk about the COVID-19 impact on democracy, of course, the measures that was put in place by the government in an effort to contain the spread of the virus have led to a broad range of human rights violations around the world, and Central Asia is no exception. For almost 2 years now, measures that have been adopted by the government pose significant challenges to democracy and civic space and expose existing human rights violations and inequalities. Many of the fundamental rights, including right of liberty, freedom of thought, freedom of expression, freedom of peaceful assembly, have been severely violated during the pandemic. Here is the Global State of Democracy Indices developed by the International IDEA. It's a quantitative tool for measuring the evolution of democracy in countries. And according to 2020 indices, the 5 Central Asian republics, they all considered as not democracies, of which only Kyrgyzstan, given some recent political openings, is the only hybrid regime. Uzbekistan also has seen some democratic advances in recent years, but probably not yet sufficient to be classified even as a hybrid regime. Well, the quality of this picture is quite low, but I'll try to explain it. The indices centers on 5 core attributes, which is representative government, fundamental rights, checks on governments, impartial administration, and participatory engagement. And as can be seen from the chart, the states of Central Asia demonstrate quite a low performance on most of the attributes, with a very little exception on fundamental rights. For the 2020 indices, cases of corruption related to COVID-19 procurement were reported in some of the Central Asian countries. In addition, by early October last year, national elections have been held in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, which raised some concerns about electoral integrity during the pandemic. Here is another democracy index compiled by the British Research Centre, the Economist Intelligence Unit. The index is based on 60 key indicators that characterize the state of democracy within the state. And the unit has consistently ranked Kazakhstan as an authoritarian regime as well, ranking it on 128 out of 167 countries for 2020. Kyrgyzstan dropped from 101st to 102nd line and scored 4.21 points like a year ago, but it was included in the category with a hybrid regime. However, in accordance to the EU report, the Kyrgyz Republic has failed parliamentary elections in October of 2020, and despite being the only non-authoritarian state in the Central Asia, it's moving to closer to authoritarian regime, and it has been registered as the steepest core decline in Eastern Europe in 2020. Tajikistan is placed 158 and is also listed as authoritarian regime. Uzbekistan is ranked 155 and improved in its position compared to 2019, but still remained in the group of states with an authoritarian regime. Turkmenistan is ranked 162 and remains as an extremely isolated state with the worst democracy in the region. Here is another press freedom index, which is annual ranking of countries compiled and published by Reporters Without Borders, and it's based upon the organization's own assessment of the country's press freedom records. In 2020, Kazakhstan landed in the 157th spot, with a very minor improvement of one line in comparison to 2019. During the COVID-19, authorities have used existing laws to suppress freedom of expression among the activists and journalists. There were reports of intimidation of journalists and activists for disagreeable opinions through fear of imprisonment. Kyrgyzstan has improved its position also for one line from 83 to 82 ranking line, and being significantly ahead of its neighboring countries, as can be seen from the chart. Tajikistan ranked 161, and it's a downgrade in comparison, for example, with 2017 and 18. According to the World Press, the country's independent media has been eliminated. The press freedom ranked Turkmenistan as in the 179 out of 180. I think ahead of only North Korea, and as can be seen from the chart, the country has been consistently ranked at or near the bottom of the index. And Uzbekistan is ranked 156, which means that the situation with press freedom is still complicated, but at the same time, the country has improved by 4 points in comparison with 2019 and 13 points in comparison with 2017. Here is the Civicus Monitor Index, which is an online platform that measures the civic freedoms, including the freedom of expression, association, and assembly. Well, civic space in Kazakhstan is rated as obstructed in 2020. And moreover, in 2019, Kazakhstan has been added to a global watch list of countries that have been recently seen a serious and rapid decline in fundamental rights. Kyrgyzstan is also rated as obstructed, and according to Civicus, the authorities pushed through the controversial new constitution, which might undermine the rule of law in the country by granting the president excessively broad powers without an effective system of checks and balances. Tajikistan is the only country rated as repressed, and the two remaining countries, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, are rated as closed, which is the most serious category by the Civicus Monitor. This is the whole picture about the state of democracy of the Central Asia countries. And we have come to last but not least slide, and I would like to mention about the importance of civil society international engagement on SDGs. I think the multi-stakeholder nature of the 2030 agenda demands an enabling environment for participation by all, as well as ways of working in partnership to mobilize and share knowledge, expertise, technology, and financial resources at all levels. And to realize this, there is a need for open and inclusive multi-stakeholder dialogue with parliaments, national and local governments, citizens, as well as civil society. Multi-stakeholder dialogue is one of the most important vehicles to bring to the table the voices of people and might otherwise be otherwise might be marginalized from broad development agenda. So through this access to multi-stakeholder dialogue, civil society can further share their invaluable insights and experiences and influence development policies and processes. Multi-stakeholder dialogues on development policies and planning, they can exist in many forms. For example, for Central Asia countries, there is a North and Central Asian multi-stakeholder forum on implementation of the SDGs. It is an annual event organized since 2017 by UNESCOP and partners from within and outside the United Nations system. This Aboriginal SDG Forum provides an opportunity to discuss the current situation on implementation of SDGs in North and Central Asia countries and possible actions and solutions for the acceleration of the 2030 agenda. And also the forum outcomes and recommendations, they're usually integrated into regional and global processes. And in particular, for the annual Asia Pacific Forum for Sustainable Development, APFSD, and the High Level Political Forum, HLPF. In some of the Central Asia countries, I think there is a lack of diversity of types of civil society engaged in multi-stakeholder dialogue. However, it's very important for civil society to have an access to multi-stakeholder dialogues, and not only at national context, but in the framework of international and intergovernmental cooperation. And in conclusion, I would like to share some of my recommendations for SDG, COVID-19, democracy, and civic space. For the SDGs, I think governments should use the SDGs as a framework for sustainable recovery and transformation. Well, because the several SDGs are already there and they are essential to addressing the post-crisis recovery and responses. Also, governments should speed up the progressive realization of universal goals. Civil society, in its turn, they should share responsibilities of achieving the SDGs. They should document and share the existing SDG initiatives and solutions that have helped the most vulnerable communities during the pandemic. On COVID-19, I think governments should build a coherent response for a sustainable recovery aligned with SDGs and human rights. They should engage stakeholders, multi-stakeholder engagement very effectively to ensure that different voices are heard. Civil society needs to integrate their key activities on COVID preparedness and response to existing activities. Also, they need to continue civic advocacy and monitoring efforts that promote transparent decision-making on crisis response activities. For the democracy and civic space, I think it's very important that governments ensure that all policies and measures taken to address the crisis respect and uphold human rights, the rule of law, they protect civic space, and prevent democratic backsliding. Government and CSO, they need to work together and across the sectors to support and complement as much as possible the efforts of multiple stakeholders. And civil society also needs to coordinate joint programming activities and share lessons learned, showing democracy's advantages in times of crisis. And on international cooperation and engagement, we need to promote regular engagement between diverse stakeholders for collective problem solving and collaboration. And civil society also needs to make some efforts to engage with communities that are most left behind and put in place solutions that empower all members of the society to participate in the 2030 agenda implementation. I think I'll stop by here, and thank you very much for your attention. I'm very much looking forward to see you all at the forum virtual event on October 26th. Thank you very much for your attention.